Hello, it's me, that very same person. Do reptiloids really exist? And if they did, what would they look like today? We're going to find that out. No magic, no mysticism, no sorcery or energy vampirism. Can there be a sensation without all this mystical nonsense? We're about to find out. According to Wikipedia, reptiloids are a hypothetical race of humanoid reptiles whose representatives are most often, though not always, depicted as having extraterrestrial origins, as well as being endowed with intelligence and the ability to take on human form. Reptilian characters appear in the mythologies of various peoples around the world, in works of science fiction and fantasy, in ufological texts, in different conspiracy theories, in tabloid articles, in some urban legends, and in popular culture. One of the first people to widely spread the idea of the existence of reptiloids was David Icke, who claimed that lizard-like aliens from space had taken control over humanity. And the most influential people on Earth, including the Queen of Great Britain and various United States presidents, are actually reptiloids. The ideas about reptiloids have no evidence and are often ridiculed in popular culture and the media. In 1982, Canadian paleontologist Dale Russell published an essay in the genre of a thought experiment about hypothetical intelligent beings that could have evolved from Troodon dinosaurs with a relatively large brain size. According to Russell, such dinosaurs could have survived the asteroid impact and the subsequent climate change, just like those from which birds eventually evolved, which would ultimately give them more time to develop intelligence and eventually create a civilization. According to other theories, reptiles initially managed to reach a much higher level of intelligence than modern science claims and survived thanks to advanced technologies. And that's when it all started. Myths, legends, hysteria. The most impressionable people thought that knowledge about the reptiloids had been sent to them from above. Well, and who will the people blame for all their troubles and failures? Well, of course, the government and the entire ruling class, starting from the leaders of countries, presidents, and ending with religious leaders of all denominations. And of course, the Vatican. How could we do without it? Along with the Masons and the Illuminati. Essentially everything that people fear. And the people's logic has its own justification, because sometimes the monstrous attitude of leaders toward their own people simply pushes one to think about their inhuman, alien origin. The truth is that, unfortunately, monstrous treatment of each other is actually a human trait. This fact is terrifying. But if we don't face the truth, we'll just keep going in circles. To be convinced of this, you don't even need to watch my video, What's Wrong with Dinosaurs, Part 1. And you don't even need to watch television. And you don't need to go to war either. It's enough to just look around or even just look in the mirror. How much evil each of us does every day. And often it happens unconsciously, consciously, or just on the level of reflexes. The saying, nothing personal, just business, is from the same opera. But I'm not here to moralize. I'm just setting some reference points in the chain of reasoning for our dialogue. How do we imagine reptiloids? Just like us, only green with sharp teeth, a forked tongue, and slit-shaped eyes? Oh, and scales too. Otherwise, they're just like us. So the topic of reptiloids has been developing quite actively since 1982. There are a lot of exposition. They have called Barack Obama, his bodyguards, Donald Trump, and the English Queen reptiloids. So it's been almost 40 years now. And during all this time, this topic hasn't faded at all. Instead, it keeps gaining more myths, legends, and chilling details. And how do the accused themselves react to this? They either don't react or respond humorously. No one was arrested, nothing was banned. Although it's not that difficult. But they don't do that. Don't you find that strange? Imagine you expose a thief in front of everyone, and he just laughs in your face. But the people themselves find an excuse for this. They say, well, they have all the power, and we still won't be able to do anything about them. Everyone has calmed down, and we live under the oppression of the serpent race, gritting our teeth in righteous anger. But for some reason, I'm not calm. All of this reminds me of a well-rehearsed show with magicians and illusionists, and the director of the show is calm. He skillfully directed the crowd's attention to the other side. Why specifically reptiloids? Why, if they evolved from dinosaurs, don't we find their skeletons? But the director already has ready answers to all the questions. The Vatican has enslaved us. Reptiloids rule the world. And we don't find their skeletons because they are reptiloids, aliens. Wait, how are they aliens? After all, the whole story with reptiloids started with the idea of dinosaurs evolving into an intelligent race. And that means we simply must find their skeletons, but we don't. So either they don't exist or they are aliens. And it all seems logical, but I just don't believe in aliens. And not because they don't exist. Of course, they do exist. There may be many, possibly very close by. And for other reasons. But more about that in other videos. It feels like the government benefits from supporting the myth about reptiloids. So maybe they're just making us look the other way. Why? I think it's a bit more complicated than it seems. Look at how the myth about reptiloids began. It started with the idea that, according to paleontologists, intelligent dinosaurs should have evolved from troodonts. And here lies the fundamental mistake. The justification for this choice was the fact that troodon had a large brain. The paleontologists played dumb. So what if it had a large brain? It's long been known that this isn't the main thing. Take an elephant, for example. Their brain is much bigger than a human's, but elephants haven't created a civilization. So brain size isn't the main thing. So what is? But the main thing, my friends, is hands. Yes, as strange as it may sound, free hands with fingers that can grab, hold, bend, press, tap, connect, and so on. It's precisely thanks to our hands that we created civilization. Look at birds. Some crows can pass intelligence tests faster than humans, but they don't have civilization. They don't have hands. The same goes for elephants. They are incredibly smart,
but they don't have hands.
And just imagine how ridiculous it would look if they showed us elephants as the ancestors of humans. But no, they show us monkeys. That's exactly because they have the most similar features to humans. They have hands, although they also have tails. It has long been established and proven that tails are not just tails, and that monkeys possess intelligence. In some countries, they have even been granted legal rights at the legislative level. Of course, hands are not the only necessary feature for creating a civilization, but they are a key one. If there are no hands, then there can be no civilization of our type. So what about estrodons? Do they not have hands? They have the same kind of rudimentary limbs as tyrannosaurs. Paleontologists couldn't have missed that. So they were just playing dumb. That means they deliberately started to mislead us. And that started 40 years ago. Why? Maybe because reptiloids really do exist. Because governments really do have contact with them through trusted representatives. Because they are the same earthly beings as humans, but for some reasons, they can't come out into the open right now. It's some kind of nonsense, but we do find skeletons of giant humans. Only they disappear somewhere later. So that means they must find reptiloid skeletons too, and they must disappear as well. So maybe it's not nonsense. Maybe we do find them. Maybe this whole story was created precisely so that If we accidentally stumbled upon such a skeleton, we wouldn't suddenly decide that it's some kind of god. Listen, that might actually be true. After all, then there wouldn't even be a need to hide these skeletons. Let them just lie in museums under the guise of some kind of sauropod. Then let's start unraveling the tangle from the very moment it got tangled up. Namely, with the definition of what is the main factor in choosing the supposed ancestor of the reptiloid. Let's list the key characteristics we need. First, the mandatory presence of hands with fingers, free hands. Second, as a consequence, upright posture and 2 legs. Third, the presence of a brain, preferably a large one. That is, to the third key point, which was taken as the basis by the Canadian paleontologist, we added 2 more: hands, legs, and, as a consequence, upright posture. In addition, in the film What's Wrong with Dinosaurs, Part 2-3, we determined that it should have a beak. Ta-da, not a forked tongue, but specifically a beak. And now the picture is starting to become clearer. The mythology of the Sumerians and Egyptians directly points to the existence of such beings, and they called them by different names. Some called them Anunnaki, others called them genies. They had names like Hor, Tot, Tak, Osiris, and so on. The famous Sumerian bas-reliefs depicting them have survived to this day. So our task is simplified to the most basic operation: to find a known dinosaur by given features and compare it with Nabrev's images. And no one has thought of this until now.
Let's begin.
But what do you see? What do you think of that? Does the skull fit perfectly? The nasal openings are exactly where they're depicted on the bas-relief. The eyes are right in the eye sockets, and even the ears are in the right place. A match. Do you believe that the ancient sculptor just happened to depict the nose, eyes, and ears exactly in these places by accident? I don't think it's a coincidence. But for each of you to make sure that this isn't Photoshop, but to check it personally, to go to the museum and see it for yourself, you need to know the name of this handsome guy, Verno. So let's introduce our winner, Iguanodon. Here are his characteristics: hands with 5 fingers, walks on his hind legs, that is, he is bipedal. Omnivorous, just like us. He has a brain. His height on 2 legs is 6 to 7 meters, which makes him a perfect fit for the 7-meter-high doors of ancient structures, right? And as the cherry on top, his skull is a perfect match for the bas-reliefs. But how can that be? In every museum, he stands on 4 legs. That's right, he does. But is that really comfortable for him? Take a closer look at his skeleton. The front legs are not at all adapted to support the body. The tail is in a place where the sacrum looks as if it came from another skeleton and was glued on. But perhaps I'm just overanalyzing. And it only started standing on all 4s in the last 20 years. Before that, all paleontologists always put it on its hind legs.
It would seem
that this video could end here, but I'll give you a few more facts to think about. Many researchers present serious arguments that under the guise of the plague, a global flood is actually hidden, which is precisely what destroyed many things, including the antediluvian civilization. But we all remember the plague doctors, walking around in fully clothed clothing, cloaks, and strange masks with beaks. Say whatever you want, but the development of civilization has proven that this kind of gas mask is uncomfortable. I wouldn't consider the ancients to be idiots. So the point was not just in the mask itself, but specifically in the beak shape. Anyone understands that such a mask leaves an indelible psychological impression. Now, perhaps it's fear. And then? And then maybe it was in such a form to inspire trust in people, to show that the gods are still alive and not just going from house to house healing. Friends, none of us are immune to making mistakes. And if you notice a flaw in my logic, don't hesitate. Clearly, competently, and without stumbling, leave your angry comment under the video.